Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you again for being here. Before we started, we were talking a little bit about the ocean and going to the ocean and just being at peace and watching the waves and the birds and the air, the clouds floating across the sky, the wind moving across our face. And I'd like you to try to get that picture or a similar picture of nature into your mind or into your heart as we go through this time together today. I always loved sitting there and watching the pelicans as they would come in flocks, small groups, I guess you would call them, maybe 10 or 12 at a time. And they were flying in single file, but they were flying just barely skimming the surface of the water, just kind of gliding over the surface of the water. Pilots would call that using the ground effect or the surface effect. When the wings get close to the ground, they actually get more lift than they get up higher because the air between the wing and the ground gets compressed. The pelicans never went to an aeronautical academy to learn that. But yet there is something within them that so easily teaches them how to do something so seemingly complex to us. They hover so close to the surface of the ocean that as the waves come in, they actually kind of go up just a little bit and then come back down. And they go between the peaks and the valleys of the waves, and they do it in perfect formation, one after the other, just flying along, looking for the catch, looking for the fish that they know must be there. Not intellectually. They didn't get up in the morning and go to the whiteboard and have the head pelican map out a plan for them. But there is that within them that is fulfilling itself as them in a manner that is for the highest good of all. It is good for the pelicans, it is good for the fish, and it is good for the ecosystem. Remember a few weeks ago I talked about a podcast that I was listening to, and they were talking about how reintroducing the wolves to Yellowstone Park had such dramatic changes on the park itself, even on the rivers, the course of the rivers in there. Because they belong, you see, because they're part of that ecosystem. The wisdom that created the whole has them there to be something, to express its life in a certain way. So if we can get that picture, it's easy for us to look in nature, the majesty of the dolphins as they move up and down the coast. And I used to love when I went sailing down there. I'd be sailing along. Of course, the sailboat is very quiet. You can hear the water hitting the hull, and sometimes the boat creaks a little bit as as the wind catches the sails. But sometimes I would be sailing along, and then all of a sudden I would hear the dolphin exhale behind me. I would hear the breath come out of the blowhole, and I would turn around and usually they were in pairs. They would come up in a pair. And they would be just behind one side of the boat. And they were perfectly matching their speed with the little bit that the sailboat could make against the current. And they would sail along, and they would swim along, and they would blow a couple times, I think I perceived it as them saying, "Hey, I'm here," but they were probably just breathing. And then they would dive down and they would go underneath the boat and they would come up on the other side. And they would swim on the other side and they would blow a couple times. And they would do that for maybe 4 or 5 minutes, and then they would take off. They could outswim me, for sure. They could swim faster than a boat. But there's just something so perfect about them. They were in their environment. They were being what they were meant to be. And yet we can't imagine that they are bogged down as we are with the activity of mind, with the activity of ego, with all of the things that we get cluttered up in our heads about, all the things that we worry about, all the things that we're constantly bombarded with, the information that comes to us in so many different ways. You know, you can't go anywhere anymore without seeing people scrolling through their phones. You know, go to the doctor's office, or scrolling through your phones. Everywhere you go, people have the information coming at them or coming from them, and it's intellectual, it's mind, it's thought. See, and the point of that, the reason I'm bringing that out is today we're talking about the difference between satisfaction and fulfillment, and the similarities between satisfaction and fulfillment. And what we generally think of as satisfaction, what is satisfying to us as human beings, is generally we are trying to resolve a desire. A desire has arisen within us. It might be hunger, it might be thirst, it might be a desire to listen to a certain song on the radio, watch a certain television program. A desire to do something, to go outside and work in the garden. But in human terms, the Buddhists would say it's grasping and aversion. We're trying to grab a hold of something, or we're trying to avoid something. Pain and pleasure is a more simpler way of, or a simpler way of explaining it. Pain and pleasure. We want to get more of the things that we believe give us pleasure, and we want to do less of the things that we believe bring us pain. It seems only natural, but that's what we want to do. So this human idea then of satisfaction is an idea of a desire arises within us, and we have to go outside of ourselves and seek something outside of ourselves that we then partake in, an activity of eating or drinking, or an activity such as working in the garden or playing a sport or doing something enjoyable. And when we do that, then there's a sense of satisfaction. That desire is kind of satisfied for a while. Yeah. So we're hungry, we eat, now we're not hungry. We're thirsty, we drink, and now we're not thirsty. And there's a couple things that we want to think of about that. I'm not saying that there's anything at all wrong with those things. Certainly we need to eat. Certainly we need to drink. Certainly we need to go do things that are just, beautiful for our soul. Work in our gardens, play our music, draw our pictures, write our poetry, sing and dance and be alive. But we need to come to an understanding of the difference between satisfaction and fulfillment, because the human ego, the human intellect, the human mind so easily gets hung up in satisfaction and ignores fulfillment. And by that I mean we're constantly chasing after something new. We want something, we get it, and then we want something else, almost immediately. If you've ever seen filmmaker Adam Curtis, a British documentary filmmaker, and he did a documentary in 4 parts about the public relations and advertising industries, and how it has learned to arouse within people or awaken within people desires for things that they didn't even know they had. He quotes, I'll just go a little bit into it, Edward Bernays. Edward Bernays was an American who was a nephew of Sigmund Freud. And Sigmund Freud came up with this theory, and he said that we as human beings are motivated by desires that we really don't even understand. They're not an intellectual desire. there's just something within us that wants. And this is when I was learning to be a salesman. They would teach us that people do not want because they have reasons. They have reasons because they want. And it was the job of the salesperson to find a want, to awaken a want, and then to give them reasons why the product or service that the salesperson was selling would help them to satisfy that want. So Freud kind of knew this. He kind of knew that at the human level, that there's something within us that wants. But it doesn't always make sense. It's not always an intellectual, oh yeah, well that's perfectly reasonable. We need to do that. And if a person, public relations, marketing, advertising, politicians, preachers, anybody who's trying to get people to do something, if that person can figure out how to push that want button in society, then they can be successful in getting what they want, which is to sell the product. So the one example that they gave was smoking cigarettes. That in the 1920s in America, smoking cigarettes was primarily a male activity. Men smoked most of the cigarettes. Women didn't smoke. It wasn't considered feminine. Smoking was considered to be a manly kind of thing. And the tobacco companies realized that they were missing half the market. They could have sold twice as many cigarettes if they could get more people smoking. And they hired Bernays to kind of figure out why. And what he did was he got a psychiatrist to work with him, and they came to interview people and talk to people and find out what they thought smoking was. And what they found out was that smoking was considered to be a symbol of male power and male freedom and all of those masculine things. And this was at a time when suffrage was coming about. This is at a time when women's rights were coming about, and women wanted to be equal and should be equal and are equal. But they weren't experiencing that. And Bernays tapped into that. What Bernays did was he equated smoking cigarettes to freedom and power. And the way that he did this was in the 1929 Easter Parade in New York City, he arranged for a public relations event, notified the media that, you know, after the parade there was going to be some type of event that they wanted to be interested in. And he hired young actresses to ride on this float in the parade, and after the parade was over, they got off the float and they all lit up a cigarette. And they said that they were lighting up their freedom torches. Now, of course, New York City, everybody knows the Statue of Liberty has the freedom torch up in her hand. And with that move, he started to equate for women that smoking was their right, was a freedom, that they were just as powerful as men. You know? And we look back at it now, we say, oh my goodness, you know, people have the right to make themselves sick, I guess they do, but this is how he kind of worked with, what was the want? The want was the desire to be equal. What did he want? He wanted to sell cigarettes. So he somehow arranged the message so that smoking cigarettes was going to have people be perceived to be equal. Now the only reason that I mention it, the only reason I brought that up is it's a good example of how sometimes the behavior that we engage in, what we're doing to try to satisfy our desire, first of all, we're not doing it in a healthful way. We may eat the wrong things or drink the wrong things or smoke. But it's this underlying want that is within us that we are trying to satisfy, and we don't know what the real want is. See? we think it's that piece of pie because we saw the advertisement on TV that said if you come in today you get a free piece of pie. We think it might be that certain brand of beverage because we saw this image on TV and it had the ice cubes and they were rattling. So a lot of times we are trying to satiate a desire, and yet we don't really know what that desire is. That is the human experience. And as Pema Chodron tells us, a lot of times we say we want one thing, we go and do completely the opposite. It's almost like we start sabotaging ourselves before we start. So keep in mind then that there's something within us that wants, and it's not necessarily an intellectual want or an intellectual reason. I'll give you another example today, maybe make it more relevant to today. Car commercials, car companies gear their advertising towards children. And you would say, well, that's crazy. Children don't drive cars. Why should car companies gear their advertising towards children? And the reason for that is that the children influence the parents as to what kind of car to buy. So the family goes to the showroom and they're looking at a car, and the kids have been swayed by the commercials, and the kids go over to the whatever minivan, they happen to see the commercials on TV where you see the kids in the back and they got the DVD screens and the kids are all happy and those kind of things. And the kids are saying, Mommy, Daddy, we need to buy this one. We need to get this car because this one's pretty, or whatever reasons they come up with, right? Their want was awakened through the commercial. The reasons are the ones that probably the commercial gave them reasons, but now they're giving the parents reasons. And what do the parents really want? Well, they want to make the children happy. Isn't that what parents want to do? Of course, grandparents are better at it, but parents still want to make the children happy. So here we have kind of this example of there are other people who understand that we as human beings, we constantly want. See, we constantly want. After the Depression, Herbert Hoover called the marketing and PR companies a happiness machine. They were stimulating the economy because as soon as people got one thing, then they wanted another, and they would go buy another, and then they wanted another, and they would go buy another, and then they wanted another, and they would go buy another. And you can see that today with everybody's got to have the latest phone that comes out, whatever. They just got to have it now. So the human experience then is one of wanting but not knowing what we want, and seeking it out there, somewhere out there. And we keep trying different things, and we get it, and we're satisfied for a little while, and then we want something else. The underlying desire, the underlying want has never been fulfilled, And we'll need to explain the difference between satisfaction and fulfillment. So satisfaction we can think of as a temporary condition. We're thirsty, we drink, we're satisfied, we're not thirsty anymore. Time goes by, we get thirsty again, we drink again, or we're satisfied, we're not thirsty anymore. Fulfillment is we're not motivated by that desire anymore. And this is the parable in the email, and I apologize, I forgot to hit the send button last night, so the email was late getting out. This is the parable that I used in the New Testament, and this is the parable of Jesus is at the well with the Samaritan woman. And he tells her, he says, whoever drinks this water here, the well water, they're going to get thirsty again. But I have water to give them that if they drink, they'll never be thirsty again. In fact, the water will become a wellspring of eternal life within them, and it will be rising up within them. Right? So instead of them going out here to the well to try to find something out there to bring in to satisfy them, there's going to be something welling up from within them. There's going to be something within them that is fulfilling itself. And of course, I don't take this literally. You know, it's not like you can go drink a cup of holy water and never be thirsty again. That's not the, I don't take that as the point of the parable. He was talking about the human experience and the spiritual experience, the physical experience and the spiritual experience. So we can come back to our example of ordinary life, of everyday living, and we can see this striving, we can see this grasping, we can see this aversion, you know. We see people who are making $10 million a year, and we think, oh my goodness, that's quite a lot of money, $10 million a year. Certainly somebody making that much money would never want any more money. But as soon as they find out that somebody else is making $20 million a year, now they're underpaid. You know, now they want to make $20 million. And you can see the salaries of the CEOs and the salaries of the sports stars. You can just see them going up and up and up to what is it, you know, and incredible to us, to people who are working for a paycheck. You know, it is just absolutely incredible, incredible. How? Remember the movie Arthur with Dudley Moore when he went broke and he said he had $400 million, and that was back at the time when $400 million was a lot of money. You know, it's that kind of, everything is relative. No matter how much people have, they seem to want more, and they're never fulfilled. Never fulfilled. That's the key point. So what we want to come back then to now is this idea of fulfillment, right? So satisfaction is kind of, the desire arises, we engage in an activity that helps to temporarily satisfy it. Hopefully we engage in that activity in doing something that's good for us. You know, we eat the right foods, we drink the right beverages, we get the physical activity, we do the things that are good for us. But we may not. You see, that's our choice. That's our choice. That's where the human will and volition comes in. I opened talking about the animals, and the animals are guided by instinct. There's something within them, and there's not a thought process that gets involved, you know, that says, oh my goodness, how high above the water do I have to fly to be in that surface effect and get the maximum lift? You know, they just do it. They just do it. There's that within them which is guiding them. But in us, because we have to make that discovery ourselves, we have to find that something within us ourselves. That instinct has been replaced by intuition. There is something within us that knows, but we have to learn to listen to it. We have to learn to follow it. And what generally happens is our thoughts are in the way, our mind is in the way, it's all cluttered up, and we're thinking, well, why can't I do this, and why can't I do that, and I need to go here, and I need to go there, and what if this, and what if that? And within us there is that which already knows, that is waiting to fulfill itself. Satisfaction is generally about doing something, eating, drinking, working in the garden, things like that. But fulfillment is generally about being something. Being something. And for us, this being is being the best expression of divine life that we can be, the spiritual life. Being that. And we get these depictions of saints and saviors and holy people throughout the ages, you know, through many different denominations, through many different cultures. But if we look at the depiction of the people that religion or that culture considers to be people who have reached this level of spiritual development we're talking about, they're content. They're content. Where they are is where they want to be. Whatever's going on, they're content with it. And it's not a false contentment. It's not like saying, well, you know, here I am miserable, but I'll need to be happy in it. No, it's an ability to be distant from the circumstances, because the circumstances are not what is important. To stay centered in what they are, and because they are centered in what they are, wherever they are is okay. They are total. They are total. So think of an acorn. Think of an acorn. Now, an acorn is an oak tree in the form of a seed. But it's not a big oak tree. It's not a huge tree that might be a couple 100 feet tall and several feet around. It has the potential to become that. But it is not yet that. Now, if we put the acorn in the ground, there's that within the acorn which knows exactly what to do to have it reach out and to draw in food and waters and to grow, and then to put out leaves and to draw in sunlight and to grow. There is something that is fulfilling itself through that seed. And we might look at it simply and say, well, it's an oak tree fulfilling itself. But then when we consider all of the acorns that come off that oak tree and all of the trees that come off of those acorns and so on and so on and so on, it's a forest. It's a forest. Right here in the palm of our hand, we can hold an entire forest. In potential. In potential. And it is not until it becomes what it was meant to be that it is fulfilled. And if we bring that back to ourselves then, to our spiritual lives, as I say, the human life is one of seeking and grasping and aversion. And we're constantly trying to get more and to make more money and to have more stuff. Oh my goodness, stuff. Within maybe 2 miles of where I live, we have simultaneously two brand new, huge self-storage buildings going up. And that's in addition to the ones that are already here. But people have so much stuff. You know, I view these self-storage places as a shrine to our clinginess, to our attachment, to our inability to let go. We have so much stuff. We have to keep getting more stuff, and then we don't have enough room for our stuff, so we have to go get storage units and put our stuff in storage units. One time we were moving and I put my stuff in the storage unit temporarily, and the guy said, "Do you want to take insurance on this?" And I said, "No." I said, "The insurance is probably costs more than anything in there is worth, you know." And he said, "Well, why are you keeping it?" And I said, "Well, I have to go through it to make sure there's not just one little precious memory somewhere in a box, something the grandchildren gave me or something that I really want to keep." We do that. We have more junk than we can go through. We have so much stuff. So the human experience is about getting stuff, you know, about how much money did you make? How much property did you own? What did you do? You know, did you do anything wonderful? Did you build great buildings? Did you start great institutions? And the human life is all about those things which do not fulfill. Which do not fulfill. By themselves, they do not fulfill. What fulfills is when we start to discover what it is that we came here to be, and we let that express itself as us and through us. See, and then this is the image of the saints, of the Buddha, of the Christ, of the people who are content. So how do we find this? First of all, do we believe that that's so? And then how do we find it? And we believe that it's so because we are expressions of that one life. For lack of a better term, we call it God. But as Joseph Campbell says, God is a word that is simply a metaphor for everything that transcends the limitations of the human mind. has no beginning, has no end, knows everything, is all powerful. Right? In a human experience, all of those things face limitations. So our concept is that there is something that does not have those limitations, but yet has chosen to come into expression as us and through us. And leave us alone until we could make that great discovery, so that we could then express it in our own unique way. And it's necessary that we discover it, because that's where the uniqueness comes in. Why does the divine create? Why does the divine create? In human terms, we create to satisfy a desire. Right? We know we're going to get hungry, so we plant a garden. We know we're going to want money to pay the rent, so we get a job. Maybe we build something. We do something. Most of the human experience, our activities are caused by trying to satisfy some desire. But the divine lacks nothing. And this is why the 23rd Psalm says, the Lord shepherds me, I lack nothing. At the spiritual level, I lack nothing. I don't have to strive to do something in order to satisfy a need, because the divine doesn't have those sorts of needs. That which is all-knowing doesn't need to know anything. That which is all-powerful doesn't need to get stronger. Right? So it doesn't need to learn. It doesn't need to test itself to get stronger. It creates out of a sense of fulfillment. It creates out of a sense of joy. What gives joy to your heart? What is it that you're engaged in when you can feel the bliss, when you can feel the joy? What is that? That is when, for a moment, we're in touch with the divine. We're in touch with the joy. So we want to think then that the divine created us out of itself to enjoy, to express joy as us. That is what wells up from within us, giving rise to eternal life. It is the joy. It is the joy of being alive. It is the joy of being of service. It is the joy of being in love. It is the joy. So Spirit doesn't create or act out of a sense of need, but out of a sense of joy. And it created us out of itself and left us alone to make the discovery that we're part of that process. And until we make that discovery, we get caught up in the ways of the world, which is about grasping and aversion. But at some point, we start to waken up to our spirituality, and we say, that's not all there is. Remember the Peggy Lee song? Peggy Lee, is that all there is, my friend? Then let's keep dancing. That's not all there is. There's more. And at that point, I believe our spiritual journey really quickens. We take an additional step. Because now we understand that the things of the world, the grasping and the aversion and the getting more stuff and the doing more things and the worship of busyness that we see in our society, we understand that that is all empty. It all leads nowhere. It is all just emptiness. And then we try to find that within ourselves, which is seeking to fulfill itself as us and through us in some unique way. In some unique way. Now, we have within ourselves kind of examples of growth in one area, but not in all areas. We get out of balance. So we may, for example, play music, or we may write poetry, or we may paint paintings. Whatever it is that we get in touch with, we may, at moments when we're engaged in that activity, we may feel the bliss. What is it you're doing when you completely lose track of time? What is it that you would do if you never got paid to do it, you know? What is it that you do that after you've done it, you just feel fulfilled? You know, it could be as simple as holding a child, loving a child, or being with your pet, or being in your garden, but not working your garden because you need to grow a garden in order to eat, but being in your garden, see? Being one with the soil, being one with the flowers, being one with nature. There's a difference. There's no striving. There's activity. We're still digging in the dirt. But there's not this sense of striving. Right? The sense of striving is gone. I'm not trying to make it happen. It is happening, and I am there. So we see people from time to time. For example, in the music industry, we see people from time to time that they're so brilliant in their music. They just kind of reach places in their music that it just takes you away. And it takes them away. And you can see when they're performing, you can see that it takes them away. It takes them someplace special. But then they fall back to earth. You know, it's like the rocket trying to get up, but not quite getting far enough. So they get up. And then they come back to earth. And then there's kind of like this depression. I was there. I tasted the honey, you know. It would be better to have none at all than to get a taste. But I've been there. I've tasted the honey. I know what the bliss feels like. I know what it tastes like. And now I'm back in ordinary life. And they have sometimes problems, right, with drugs and alcohol and things like that. It's tension. The tension is just enormous. And what we want to do is we want to remember two things. One is you want to find that thing in your life that helps you get in touch with that bliss, and you want to be with that whenever you can. You want to be with that so you can have that feeling. But what you want to do is you want to grow into that more fully, more completely. So it's not this, when I'm playing my music, I'm in heaven. But when I get up in the morning and go to my day job, it stinks. We want to find a way to be with that feeling. And this is, I think, key, because sometimes people say, well, it's real simple. I just quit my day job and I'll play music all the time. And that's a possibility. But if you haven't really grown into that, you'll probably find other things to strive for, other things to grasp at. Can you find a way to carry that feeling of fulfillment? Where your center is when you are fulfilled, can you stay in that center? So you'll hear people talk about the centers, you'll hear gurus talk about the centers. We probably need to touch on that briefly. But if you were to stop right now and close your eyes, and I just ask you, where is the center? Where is your center? You would try to answer me. You would try to find an answer to that. And for most of us, it moves. It moves. Most of the time in our society, we are in our head. We are in our head. This is why in our society, if when people say I'm thinking, they point to their head. They'll take their finger and they point to their head. But if you go to other cultures and people say I'm thinking, they point to their navel. That's their center. That's where they think they are. Where are you? Where are you? Are you in your head? Are you in your heart? Where are you? So if you were to do an experiment and just sit and try to scan your whole being and say, what feels like the center of my being? Where do I think my consciousness is centered? And like I say, so much in our society believes it's the brain and it's the head. But it's not. It's not. And we have to find it. Now we can learn to direct it. See, we can learn through the practice of meditation to direct it. And this is why meditation is an important spiritual practice. Right? Not only does it help us to slow the thoughts down, the monkey mind thoughts that keep getting in the way. See, what it is that is within us that is trying to fulfill us is already there. We don't have to create it. It's already there. But we can't see it because we've got all this other junk going through our brains. Right? And this is the example of the ripples on the surface of the pond, and there's a valuable gem down just below the surface of the pond in the water. But we're thrashing about in the water looking for the gem, and we're putting ripples on the surface, and they're reflecting the light, and we can't see down below the water, and we've stirred up mud and we can't see below the mud. We have to cease that activity. And when we do that, we find that which is already there, the precious stone. Right? So meditation helps us to learn how to not be so easily distracted with our thoughts. And in learning to meditate, we can also learn how to consciously move our center. There's a movie with actor Jeremy Irons in it some years ago, and he played twin brothers in the movie. They were doctors of some sort. And he played twin brothers, and it was an amazing job because he's one actor, but you could tell, that there was a difference between the two brothers. And then, I believe, one brother killed the other brother and assumed his identity. And now you had one actor who was playing one brother, playing the other brother, and you could see the difference. The audience could perceive the difference. So an interviewer asked him, and he said, "Well, how in the world did you do that? You're one person. You were playing two, and that must be difficult enough, creating a difference in the two characters that the audience would know when they came on screen. They would be able to tell which one was the other. But then they could tell when one was impersonating the other." And what he said, I didn't understand it at the time that I heard it, and I had to think about it. He said that when he played the one brother, he moved the center into a certain chakra. And when he played the other brother, he moved the center into a different chakra. And when he played the brother impersonating the brother, he had his energy centered in the chakra of the first brother, but tried to mimic the behaviors of the second brother. And because the center was in a different place, even though he was engaging in the same mannerisms of the brother that was being impersonated, because his energy was centered in a different place, the audience could perceive the difference. So we can learn to do this. You can learn to scan, and you can learn to find where your center is, but you can also learn to direct it. So an easy meditation that we would teach is to close your eyes and to visualize the area between your armpits. Not just where your heart is, but your whole breast, in between your armpits, your whole chest cavity. Right? And that's the heart. That's the heart chakra. And as you breathe in, breathe into that area. And as you breathe out from that area. And feel that area growing warmer. And usually what happens is when we do that, we start to feel peaceful. Because peace is the nature of the heart. And when we do that, we start to get a feeling for what it is like when our energy is centered in our heart. And there are different meditation techniques to do that with each of the chakras, which are the energy centers of the body. But we can practice in our meditation, and we can learn how to do that, and we can learn how to keep our attention. See, the energy goes where the attention goes. If we put our attention on our heart, our energy goes there. If we put our attention in other areas, it goes there. And eventually we learn, as we go through the day, we learn to be aware of where we are centered. Where we are centered. And then what happens is even though we are engaging in some of the other activities that looked exactly the same, eating and drinking and working in the garden and those sorts of things, Now, instead of it being a striving, a grasping, or an aversion, now it is a fulfillment. Now it is a fulfillment. We're busy, we're engaged, we're doing things, but it is not about the doing. It is not about the doing. It is about the being. It is about the being. The last thing we need to consider with the energy centers is that our natural center is the navel, the solar plexus. And if you watch small children breathe, they belly breathe. Right? They breathe into their belly just naturally, just easily. We discover the energy center in the navel. We don't create it. We can direct attention in our head, and we do that quite easily. We just stay in our head. And you have to be taught the things of the head. You have to be taught mathematics and all of those things. We can learn how to consciously bring our energy to our heart center, and then, as Jeremy Irons, we can go through the day. Consider yourself an actor on the stage. You can go through the day being in your heart center. And from time to time ask yourself, where am I? Where am I centered? You slip back up into your head, do as I said, close your eyes for a minute, take a few breaths, bring your energy down to your heart, and go back to your activities. And then eventually, over time, what happens is our center moves back to where it was when we were infants. And we just are. We just are. And at that time, what happens is we are divine life fulfilling itself as us, fulfilling itself through us. There's no more sense of want. There's no more sense of need. There just is. Whatever is appropriate is there for us. This is the example of the birds in the air and the lilies of the field. They don't worry. They don't struggle. What they need is there. The pelicans are flying along over the ocean, and what they need is there. You see. Whatever needs must be this day are here. No matter what the circumstances are. Whether they appear to be good or whether they appear not to be good. Whatever the circumstances are, we are centered. We are given the example again from the East of the man who had a horse, and the horse ran away, the mare ran away. And the neighbors came and said, "Oh, isn't it terrible, your horse ran away. It's just an awful thing, your horse ran away." And he said, "Perhaps." All that happened is the horse ran away. And a few days later, the mare returned, and there were 3 or 4 stallions that had followed her home. And the man pinned them all up in the corral, and the neighbors came and said, "Oh, what a great fortunate thing happened here. Your mare ran off, but then she came back and she brought all these stallions back with her. And now you have more horses than you had before. Isn't that wonderful?" And he said, "Perhaps." All that happened is the mare came home and the stallions followed her. The man's son went out and he tried to tame the horses for saddles, and he got on one of the stallions, and the stallion threw him and the boy broke his leg. And the neighbors came and they said, "Oh, it's so terrible. These stallions came home and your son tried to ride the stallion and fell off and broke his leg. Isn't that awful?" And he said, "Perhaps." All that happened is the boy broke his leg. And then a warlord's army came through town and conscripted all of the young men and drafted them into the warlord's army. But because this man's leg was broken, the boy's leg was broken, the man's son didn't have to go. And then the neighbors came and said, "Aren't you lucky that your son broke his leg? He didn't have to go off into the army with the warlord." And the man said, "Perhaps, perhaps." I'll leave you with one more story that I think really illustrates. So that one was, we have to learn to be centered and not to get caught up and move back into our head and worry. And the other one is that in Thailand there was a monastery, a Buddhist monastery, and they had a statue, an enormous statue of a Buddha that was made of gold, sitting, in the lotus position with the legs crossed, folded over. And an invading army was coming, and they knew that the invading army was coming, and they knew that if the invading army found this statue of the Buddha that was made with gold, that they would chip it apart, melt it down, and they would take the gold for themselves. And they were trying to figure out what could they possibly do. The statue was too heavy to move and to hide. What could they possibly do? So they decided to hide it in plain sight, and they mixed up some cement, and they coated the statue with a thin layer of cement, so it looked like a stone or a concrete statue. And the warlord's army came, and they looked at the statue, and they didn't give it a second glance as they marched on through. They thought it was just a stone statue. And time went on, and people forgot. They forgot that the statue was actually made of gold. And many hundreds of years later, a young monk was out meditating and decided to go sit onto the lap of the Buddha in this statue while he meditated. And by this time, the concrete had become loose. So when he got up on there, the concrete slid off and revealed the gold. The gold that was in the statue all along, but nobody knew was there. That golden Buddha is within you and I. It is that spiritual part of us that is seeking fulfillment. We are the ones who have allowed the layers of concrete through our thoughts and through our human activities and through our striving and our grasping and aversion. We have allowed those things to cloud our vision so we can't or do not see the gold, the jewel that's within. But we have the power of choice, and we can choose to quiet our minds. We can choose to find our center. We can choose to find that activity that allows us to experience bliss and fulfillment and to dedicate more time to it. And most importantly, we can choose to find our intuition, listen to our intuition, and follow our intuition as it leads us from satisfaction to fulfillment. And so it is. Let's come together then in a closing treatment. And let's recognize that the gifts have already been given. God can do no more for us. The divine can do no more for us. Love can do no more for us than it has already done. It is placed within the center of our being, everything that we need. It is waiting for us to awaken to be that which we came to be, to fulfill that which we came to be in our own unique way. We dedicate ourselves now to making that discovery and to allowing that purpose to fulfill itself through us and as us, authentically. We are grateful for the opportunity to share these ideas this morning. We are grateful for the opportunity to allow our hearts to reach out and touch fulfillment. We're grateful to know that there's a power in the universe that responds to us according to our belief. And we release this treatment to that power, knowing so certainly it is done, that we say together, and so it is.